Okay, good morning, Rabbi Isai. Good morning. We're coming to this morning's legal holiday shir, brought to you by the one and only Link Halacha Institute of Los Angeles. This is not going to stay. Okay, so I just want to begin by mentioning that, like Rabbi Brander said so eloquently, that eating is, yes, a big part of Jewish life, and it's a big part of everyone's life, and that's why Chachamim were utilizing the idea of eating and drinking as an important aspect in our lives in order to promote Kedusha. In the Rambam, Hilchos Machos Asuros, prohibited food items are found in the Sefer called Kedusha. Yes, eating has what to do with holiness, and particularly when it comes to refraining from eating and becoming close to them and going in their ways. Who knows what the Jewish nation will look like if the Jews would actually have, in fact, kept studiously and fastidiously the halachas of Bishul Akum. The intermarriage we know is a little bit out of control, and we're losing Jews left and right. And if Jews would keep the Hilchos Yichud and Hilchos Bishul Akum, these different archakos that Chazal instituted, so certainly the Jewish nation will look different. So the more that we're machazing this inyan, Zelu Mazeh, the Goyim are celebrating their holidays, and we are coming to combat their Kaychas Atuma with learning Torah instead. When we say Birchas Torah in the morning, we say Hashem, Bachar Banu Mikol Amim, we thank Hashem that the Torah has an aspect that it separates us from the Goyim. And not only that, but today we're going to learn the Torah about being separate from the Goyim. So in that regard, it's super special. Okay, with that we'll begin. So, just a disclaimer, the flyer, it was maybe my fault, but it says on it, donuts, potato chips, sushi, cholent, kalim, tuna, coffee, and whiskey. No, it's not a menu. It's not what we're serving today. A few people maybe jokingly or didn't understand, just to clarify. I mean, there might be some from the Shabbos Kiddushim, some whiskey if you want. You can bring it out. It's, I won't, I'll have afterwards, but not during this year. So the Gemara in Avodah Zarah gives us a laundry list of things that we may not partake of. One of them is shlakos, cooked food items. Okay, now why can you not eat the food that was cooked by a goy? So the Gemara in Avodah Zarah Daf Lamed Zayin goes through analysis of trying to figure out what the source is. So first, it actually brings a pasuk. It says, it's a mashma that when the Jews went through the Midbar and they approached the different Goyim, Edom, and so on and so forth, they said, we'll purchase food from you. And the food items that they mentioned were things that were water and the like, things which were not changed by fire, by cooking. So that implies that the only thing that we can procure from Goyim that was processed was things that you can not changed by fire. In other words, if it was cooked, you cannot eat them. And the Gemara goes on to say that no, the proof is not really from the pasuk because it's not clear. Rather, it's an asmach that's merely just the pasuk supports the Chazal's enactment, like we find throughout the Shas and different halachas, that even though Chachamim mandated it, however, they based it on a pasuk in the Torah, and that's that. However, what is the reason? Why, in fact, did the rabbis institute this rule? So the Rishonim, so Rashi tells us, first and foremost, so on the Mishnah, he says, Shlakos. Yeah, lost it. About the pause. It's all because of chasamus. The reason why we cannot engage in eating the things that they cook is because it's going to bring kiruv das. It's going to bring us close to the goyim. When they cook for us and we eat their food, it's going to bring us close in shami, and we might come to marry them. Rashi also mentions another svara, which is also brought by other Rishonim, that we're afraid perhaps we'll become accustomed to eating and drinking with them. We might eat something which is not kosher. Okay, these two reasons play an important role in terms of the dynamic of what's going to fall under the category of what's allowed and what's not, and therefore it's very important to establish that. And all the Rishonim bring these reasons. It's because of chasamus. You might marry goyim, it might become too chummy, too friendly, become mechutin with a goy, and because they might feed you something that's not kosher. Okay, the Gemara right away tells us off the bat two primary heterim to Bishul Akum. One of them is anything which is nechal chai, anything which is eaten raw, meaning it doesn't need to be cooked in order to be eaten. So that is not going to be considered to be Bishul Akum. And the other heter is something which is not oila shulchan malachim. Anything which is not put on a king's table at his meal, that also does not that's not asur because of Bishul Akum. Okay, so now we're going to try to delve a little bit and try to understand these two categories better and understand different nafkaminas of these two things. Okay, so the Rashi in Beitza tells us that what's the reason that something that's eaten raw without cooking could be is not a problem Bishul Akum. Rashi says, since it's able to be eaten raw, it's on some level considered not to be cooked. It's like he didn't help me at all. In other words, the problem is that when we eat a guy's cooking, it's like he did me a favor. He did me a favor by cooking my food for me, and if the food item could have been eaten anyway, then it's not going to be a problem Bishul Akum. Okay, that's the svara behind that. Now, obviously, you can't say that svara in terms of Shabbos, for example. When it comes to Shabbos, we know there's also Isser Bishul on Shabbos. We can't say, the thing is able to be eaten raw, so so then there's no problem of cooking it. So the answer is we're talking about a D'Rabbanan, on a D'Oraisa level, even if something is able to be eaten raw. So when you cook it makes it better, so that's called cooking. As opposed to Bishul Akum, the rabbis, it's rabbinic, and therefore they were more lenient in terms of the parameters, and they said, if you're able to eat it anyway, so it's like he didn't cook for you, it doesn't count, his cooking doesn't count. The other svara of Shulchan Malachim, the Rambam, let me do the lashon of the Rambam, as follows. Okay, when do we say that there's a problem with Bishul Akum? When we're referring to a food item which is produced, which is put on the table of a king, lechol b'sapas, to eat together with bread, like bread, like meat and eggs and dagim and fish. But something which is not put on the king's table to eat with bread, like, for example, turmesin, not really sure what that is, but there was something in those days. What's that?
It's kind of bean. It's a bean. It's a kind of bean.
Type of bean, okay. Why? What's the reason for the heter of Shulchan Malachim, that if something is not put on the king's table for his meal with bread, that it's going to be allowed? She'ikar gzeira, the main gezerah, the decree mishum chasos, because of marriages. The guy shouldn't invite you b'suda for a meal. Something which is not chash enough to go on the table of a king. Your friend does not invite you for. Okay, if something's not chashuv, you don't invite your friend. You see from this, you invite your friend for something. It's got to be for something chashuv, not for just for something not so chashuv. Okay, that's the basic idea between the two heterim. Now let's delve a little bit into understand what's called nechal chai. What falls under the category of things which are eaten raw. Now clearly, all fruits and vegetables are eaten raw, so therefore purchasing them from a goy would not be a problem. Now, I just also want to clarify that different things we're going to talk about in this year, about what's allowed, what's not allowed, this is all just derech of learning. We're just going through the discussion of the topic. In terms of actual halacha, if a product is mutter or not, you need to also consider many other factors. For example, if there's any treif in it, or if the hechsher is good. So we're just going through the idea of Bishul Akum, where it applies and where it doesn't, in terms of getting a better understanding. And Mirz Hashem, after coming through this year and discussing all different points, will be zeichet, hopefully, to have more zehirus in halacha, which is really the purpose of these halacha talks, in order to become more aware of issues and become more observant in those regards. Okay, so when it comes to something that's eaten raw, the big question that the Achronim talk about is, do we look at the food item that's in front of me, or do I say that the general species is taken into account? The Gilyon Marsha says that he's very confused about this. Let's say you have a pear. There were these pears once upon a time that the certain type of pear that needed to be cooked in order to be eaten. Well, do you say that this pear over here needs to be cooked, so it's a problem Bishul Akum because I couldn't eat it without cooking it? Or do you say, well, in general, pears don't need to be cooked, so this pear should also be allowed? What do you say? So he wants to say another application of this. The Chalkis Binyamin says something fascinating. It says fruit that becomes overly ripe, or before it's ripe, could also fall under this question. Because even though it's going to have a time frame where it's perfectly edible as is, but before it's ripe or after it's too ripe, you don't eat it without cooking it. So it could be even if you're getting it, even though there are times when you eat it without cooking it, but when it was cooked when it was overly ripe or it was not ripe enough, so then it could also potentially be a problem Bishul Akum, because you look at the min and not the you look at the species, not the min. So that's the question. So he wants to be makel. This Gilui Mashra holds it's okay. However, the Chalkas Binyamin brings many different poskim that want to be machmir on this question and say that you look at the thing in front of you. That this thing itself could not be eaten without cooking it. For example, it was overly ripe or wasn't ripe enough, so then it's a problem. Even though the species in general maybe is eaten raw. So this is proved by the Magen Avram when it comes to zanjabil. That means ginger. Ginger. The Magen Avram says that the Gemara explains that when it's raw, it's edible. When it's dry, it's not edible. It's too hard to eat unless you cook it. So do we say it's a problem of Bishul Akum or not? So the Magen Avram says it's not a problem of Bishul Akum because you could eat it with other things. We'll get back to that in a moment to understand that idea. But he does not rely on the fact that, sometimes it's eaten raw when it's, for example, when it's robust. Why do I care about right now that it's dry? But when it's robust, I can eat it. So why is there a problem of Bishul Akum now? So clearly the Magen Avram holds that we look at the way it is right now. We don't say, in general, the species is eaten raw, and therefore it should be problematic. The Shevet Levi actually argues on Chalkas Binyamin and says that it's allowed because, just the consensus of the poskim, they tell you that something is eaten when it's raw. When you go buy fruit and vegetables from the goyim, for sure the things that they cooked were things which are not edible. The ones that are edible raw, they sell when they're raw. But the things that they're cooking, they're going to use dafka the schlera, which isn't cooked. So for the most part, the things you're getting from the goyim are going to be problematic, and we don't find this distinction. Therefore, he holds that should serve as a proof that there's no issue as long as the min in general is eaten raw. That is good enough. By the way, I didn't see anyone talk about this. I didn't do enough research, but this could be very negay for tomato sauce. Why does tomato sauce not have to be have a hechsher of Bishul Akum? Now we can discuss this. Yeah, you have a question? Raising your hand. Hold on to the end. Why does tomato sauce not have a problem with Bishul Akum? We could discuss maybe different elements, but in terms of the fact that tomatoes are certainly eaten raw, hold on, not so fast. Which tomatoes did they use to make the tomato sauce? Probably the ones which were no good, the ones that you couldn't eat anyway, right? You have the tomatoes sitting on your counter for a week or two, like, don't throw them out, I'm going to use them for an omelet. Like, okay, fine, that's the ones that they use, probably. Again, I didn't do enough research, but I'm just pointing out that this can make enough community regarding tomato sauce that according to the Chalkas Binyamin it should be an issue, and according to the Shevet Levi, it's okay, because we look at the general species. Okay, what about the svara that we just mentioned a second ago, that something is eaten raw when you mix it with other things? If you eat it by itself, no, nothing doing. But if I'll mix it with other things, then I'll eat it. So again, we have this Magen Avram, that the Mishnah Berurah brings it also, that ginger that's dried out, even though you can't eat it without cooking it, the Gemara says already they could buy it from the goyim. Why? And Rashi says no problem, Bishul Akum. And the Magen Avram explains because you eat it with other stuff. In other words, even though I don't eat it by itself, but I eat it with other stuff. This is also based on the concept of oil. Oil, the Gemara talked about if it's a problem from buying it from the goyim, even though perhaps it should be a problem with Bishul Akum. The answer is you eat it raw with other stuff. You don't eat it raw by itself, but you eat it together with other things, and that serves as enough of a qualification to eat it, even if you cook it and you're eating it by itself. Since it's eaten raw with other things, that's allowed.
Oil is cooked.
If you buy it cooked, it's cooked.
You buy it.
No, in other words, that's a proof. This idea of oil from the Gemara is a proof to this ginger thing. So actually the Magen Avram brings another proof from salted fish. Small salted fish, the Shulchan Aruch Paskins, based on Ramban, and the Taz says this, that it's not a problem of Bishul Akum because it's eaten as is. So because they are not oil on Shulchan Malachim, so therefore they're allowed. And it's eaten with their salt, so it's not a problem. It's not a problem. However, basically bottom line is the way that the Magen Avram understands it, which is clear from the sources, that you eat it together with other things. You don't eat those salty fish, right? Herring, right? Anyone just eat it out of the thing? No, you eat it with crackers or something else. So that's a proof that even though we're monitoring something that's eaten in a certain state, but it's dafka with other stuff, so that is going to be a heter. Now, salting, the fact that it's eaten with salt, the halach is dafka with salt. If you didn't salt it and you cooked it, that will be a problem. Again, just to clarify, the small salty fish, which we'll get back to in another context, the Shulchan Aruch says if it's salted, so since it's eaten all day it's salt, so if the guy cooks it, it's okay. Well, why don't I say, well, even if you didn't salt it, Well, but I eat it with mixing it with salt. So then it should be the same thing as what we're saying from the Magen Avraham with the ginger. So the answer is that there's a difference between eating something with other stuff or preparing the food. When it comes to eating the ginger with bread and maybe sugar, so that's just the way that you eat it in like a salad type of thing. It's all mixed with other stuff. But if you have to salt something in order to eat it, that's more preparatory. It's called preparing the item. It's not called edible until it's prepped properly. Salt is not called a side thing you eat it with. It's called part of the processing. Sorry? Part of the processing. So if you cook the small fish before it's salted, it'll be a problem with Bishul Akum. But if it's salted, then there's no problem with Bishul Akum because you'll eat it together with bread.
So would that be the same if you cooked it with fire, a small fish?
If it was salted already, that's allowed.
But if it's not, it's salted.
We'll clarify again, but yes. Fine. That's it. Now, let's talk about our favorite thing, sushi. Okay? My colleagues were waiting for this day when we talked about sushi in public. So sushi is not a problem with Bishul Akum, at least the fish part, because it's raw, right? So what's the why is sushi being showcased over here in Bishul Akum if anyway it's raw? The answer is that here's the big question: is fish called a problem with Bishul Akum? We saw clearly that Shulchan Aruch talks about fish. Now the reason why it talks about it is because times in Gemara, an interesting dynamic. When it came to meat, people would eat meat raw. Chazi l'unsa, right? You could chef the cow and eat the meat raw, and it was amazing. And fish, no one ever touched it. Nowadays, it's fakert, right? Eating raw meat is very seldom. You'll find it here and there, but it's not widely accepted at all. And eating raw fish, I mean, every third restaurant, kosher not kosher, is sushi. You know, you have takeout with the fried chicken and sushi takeout. So eating raw fish is extremely commonplace. And to say that it's not wide accepted, maybe it was true maybe like 20 years ago, but nowadays, fish, salmon and tuna for sure, connie, whatever that stuff is, whitefish, something, it's definitely eaten raw. So the question is, can we allow all Bishul Akum on salmon and tuna because it's eaten in the context of sushi? So I asked this, sorry, I'm a little out of order. So in terms of just clarifying, in terms of looking at what people do, there's three ways to look at it. Do we say that it goes after right of the olam? What does most of the whole world do? What does the Medina do? And what do I do myself? There's some place can hold that if I eat it, so then that's good enough, which is a very big kula. The Chalkut Binyamin says, you go bust your Medina, your town, your city, and whatever the minhag of most people in that city is, so that's what you go with, which makes a lot of sense. Okay, so that should be it, right? Sushi should be okay. So I asked this question to Rabbi Bess, asked him if any poskim nowadays he knows matter salmon or tuna because of that, and he says he doesn't know. So I said, okay, what do you think? He says he's not sure, but it's based on two things. First of all, it's eaten always with other stuff. Okay, the raw fish and the sushi is eaten together with the rice and stuff, right? So do we say that's good enough? And the answer is yes. We just had a Magen Avraham that the Mishnah Berurah passes like that the ginger that's raw is and dried is eaten together with other stuff, and therefore it's allowed. So sushi definitely should be a paradigm for eating fish al yedei a goy that cooks it because it's eaten even together with other stuff. I can eat it by itself also when the goy cooks it. That's number one. Number two is he said, what about the way it's prepared? Is sushi fish prepared in a certain way, like we saw a moment ago, that the small fish are not a problem with Bishul Akum because they're salted and you can eat it with the salt. How do they make sushi fish? Is it prepared in a certain special way or not? Now, there is something called sushi grade fish, and it's a big question if that is actually just a marketing thing or if that's real, right? In other words, when it first came out, they called it sushi grade. I did a little research. I don't know how much you can trust it, but some say that it was just for marketing. It's not. There's really no difference. There's mamash no such thing as sushi grade. It's just in order for people to buy more stuff. However, if you look at the way that they process the sushi, it's always salted first, apparently. So it's salted first, and it's frozen at a very, very low temperature for mamish a week or so, in order to kill all the bacteria. So, tzarachian, if these factors are so important in terms of the processing of the fish that it's not called you eat it without those things. I don't know enough about that you need to speak to a real expert about. But certainly, if you buy the sushi fish that is edible for sushi, lokala deus, no matter who you ask, and then the guy cooks that is for sure allowed. That's not a problem. And if you argue, then so I'm not sure what to say. It should be 100% fine. Kiva Steinmetz quoted in the Gillian of the Toronto Kashrus editorials says that in fact sushi is prepared in a special way, and therefore we can't matter fish based on that in general because it's sushi grade is a real thing, and therefore fish is not mutter based on that. We have to keep to what the Shulchan Aruch says. Now it could be I don't know. So okay, that's the information I gave you. You could take that and figure out what to do with that now. Okay. Now let's.
So the reason to be lenient would be because it's eaten with other things.
Right. It's eaten raw together with other things. Some would say no. You can.
It's eaten raw.
Is it normal to eat fish raw? Do people do that?
No, they eat that sushi raw, so
So for the most part, people eat the sushi. They eat it together with the rice. In order to eat it plain, they eat it together with the stuff. But that's okay. Even if that's the case, Magen Avraham says that's suffice to matter Bishul Akum. Even when you don't eat it with this. Sorry.
The reason in the logic to say it's not good is because
It's the same salmon. It's the same salmon. Why is it different mint?
so what's the logic to be strict?
I don't know. Again, sushi grade is different. If sushi is salted and frozen a certain way, and it's only eaten based on this process, and this is imperative in terms of the processing of the sushi, so then that would not give us any leniency regarding other fish that didn't have that process.
It's called a different min?
No, because it's eaten all day, it's melach. In other words, just like the small fish are eaten with salt, but if you didn't have the salt, it'd be usher, because it's not eaten without the salt unless you cook it. So once you prepare it in a certain way, it's eaten that way, so then there's no problem. Bishul Akum.
So, so like the freezing of the fish only.
Sorry?
The freezing of the fish only occurs in North America to kill the Anisakis worms.
Okay.
So
It's a good question. This requires more research.
They don't do that, so people have worms in their body.
People eat them with the worms. Okay, so if you eat worms, so then it's okay. That's what Adam's saying. All right. So now the next question about now let's move on to Shulchan Malachim. Shulchan Malachim. Do we look at the min or do we look at the Michael? Just like we had before, a discussion regarding the species and the actual thing in front of you regarding Nechol Chai, eating raw. What about regarding Shulchan Malachim? If something is eaten on the king's table or not, do we look at the thing in front of you or do you look at the general species? So the famous topic, which was discussed many moons ago, is potato chips. Okay, potato chips, no questions. I remember from last year that you mamish ruined it. Okay, sorry. You. From anyone, late plug, no questions. Unless I give an exception. So potato chips, widely understood, are not. Well, let's talk about potato. Are potatoes oil shulchan malachim? Are potatoes king's food or not? The Aruch HaShulchan says potatoes. It's for peasants. Who eats potatoes? It's cheap. You plant it. It grows a ton. It's peasant food. All the places can say nowadays potatoes are chashuv. They're for sure put on a king's table. And we'll take this opportunity to mention that any time you see in halacha from earlier poskim that something was oila, was not oila, you have to look at nowadays. We don't look at what happened in Chazal. It's not like, they decided based on that and that's what will apply always. This is something that's more of a variable halacha. Essentially, you don't find that so much. Halacha usually is based on the occurrence during their times and then it applies throughout the generations. With regard to Nechol Chai Shulchan Malachim, it depends on every dar v'dar. Okay. So, do we look at the species or do we look at the food products? So, potatoes, we're saying, are oila. You put them on the king's table. Kings will eat them. However, potato chips will not be oila shulchan malachim. And I will read to you from a quote that I saw from the Star K, that they asked the White House executive chef whether potato chips are served at state dinners. The chef's response was as follows: we would serve whatever the guest wants. However, we never serve potato chips. Nor do we ever use canned goods. Everything is prepared fresh.
Never
canned goods. Now, canned is whether you can prove that or not, it's interesting because a lot of times it's cooked before it's put on the can. And it's already shulchan malachim before. Then it's preserved afterwards. They ruined it, but that doesn't make a heter. If it became bishul akum beforehand, the fact that you put it in a can afterwards is not necessarily a heter. But back to the potato chips. So, again, nowadays potatoes are oila, but potato chips are not oila. No, what do you say? Can you eat potato chips that are OU? I guarantee you, no Jew put on the fire in the Lay's factory. Guaranteed. Okay, maybe he did, but he's probably not from. Probably. So, do we look at the species in front of us, or do we look at the potato chip? It's not oila, or do we say, well, potatoes are oila? So, the Beis Yosef and Ramah hold, based on the rush, with rice bread. Rice bread is not under the category of pas akum, which would have more of a heter if it's made by a palter, by a baker. Rather, it's under the category of Bishul Akum because it's not one of the 5 grains. And therefore, it would technically be a problem of Bishul Akum. However, when it's prepared in a way that is oila, it's a problem. As opposed to, when it's not prepared in a special way, it seems to be more like a peasant food, this rice bread, and therefore it's allowed. Even though rice, certainly, ask any Persian monarch, it's oila al shulchan malachim, right? All types of rice. Rice bread, however, is not oil al shulchan malachim, and the Ramah basically understand based on the Rosh that it is allowed, and therefore, when you look at the species in front of you, don't look at the general min, and that would be a kula. Also find the Ramban, back to our small salted fish, that they're oila when they're salted, and they're not oila when they're not salted. Okay, so you see that we're going to give a heter to this thing because it's not oila as is, despite the fact in general, maybe it would be. Okay. Now the Isra Heter actually argues, and he says that no, he understands the Rosh different perhaps, and he says that since rice in general is al shulchan malachim, so rice bread is always going to be a problem. And the Ramon Teres Chatos argues on the Isra Heter. However, the Stimus HaPaiskim and the kashrus agencies hold that we go with what's in front of you, we don't look at the general min, and therefore potato chips are mutter. Now, interestingly enough, Ramesha Feinstein writes in the newer edition of the Igros Moshe that there's no clear heter for potato chips unless that we rely on the factory production, which seemingly most people, the Hamaynam, are relying on. Okay, there's a heter of the fact that it's factory produced. We'll get to that later. All right, and that's the main heter for potato chips. So someone that's mekel should be meicha because anyway it's midrabanan. So apparently Ramesh understood that we go after the min and not the meichel. Okay, potatoes are oila, so potato chips should be aser, but don't be meichel because it's made in a factory, so maybe it's better. So it's shtickle shver why Ramesha was so machmer if the place in general seemed to be mekel on the question of potato chips. Rabelsky points out that the person who asked the question of Ramesha doesn't really remember which food item they were talking about. Okay, seems we get out of all the questions. Oh, Ramesha said this. Oh, well, they forgot exactly what the discussion was. Seems that Rabelsky is entertaining the possibility that the discussion was actually about French fries or some similar product, and that was maybe more oila. That's why he didn't go basar the Michael. Should be noted that in England, French fries are called chips. So from the Star K website. So maybe that's.
It applies across the board like corn chips and stuff like that. Also.
Yeah, it applies to all food. Yeah. So I mean.
All chips.
Yes, right. So the same thing. Corn is definitely oil shulchan malachim, I imagine, and with nechal chai though, so it's fine. You have to cook a potato, you don't have to cook corn. So corn is for sure fine. Okay. Okay, now we talked about the heter of shulchan malachim. What is called? Sorry.
Corn is not cooked?
Nechal chai.
It's not that corn. I don't think so.
Corn?
It's very hard. You have to.
Oh, right. It's not nechal chai. Right. Thinking about after it's cooked, right? Not in the kitchen. I'm sorry. Okay. What do you mean? You buy in the store. It's okay. Okay. What's called shulchan malachim? What's called a melech? Is it dafka a king, or is it any statesman or official, or maybe even a fancy party could suffice for shulchan malachim? So, like we said, based on the Rambam, the Chalkut Binyan brings us as a proof. It says that what is the yisoid of shulchan malachim? Why is that a heter if it's not oil al shulchan malachim? Shikar gzeir mishum mechasas shlei yizminu agoy atzlei besuda v'davar sheina oil al shulchan malachim. Because you won't invite your friend over for something which isn't chashuv, and therefore we look at a king's table. Now, anything which is being served in shilos or at a wedding or a fancy occasion certainly is chashuv enough that you would invite your friend over for. So the Stimus HaPaiskim is that we don't go with king, we go with any fancy setting, and that is what Rav Asher Weiss also says. To my colleague Rabbi Fiskis for printing out this tshuva. It's going to get showcased again soon. Where's Hashem? We'll just read that part. That then Getter Shulchan Malachim, what we consider Shulchan Malachim is not necessarily connected to a kingdom, to a king. Rather, the kavanah is a chashuv food that you would present at a chashuv suda, okay, at a chashuv meal setting. Okay, that's good enough. And actually, the truth is, it could be even the other way around. And the Rambam says that Shulchan Malachim is the factor that I invite my friend for something. So if you're not sure, basically, if you know that you'd invite your friend over for something, so probably that's called Shulchan Malachim. Because the whole point is that's going to be chashuv enough I have to invite for. If I know for a fact that I would invite, that everyone would invite for this thing is so chashuv, this is liver, it's liver is chashuv, right? or something like that. So then I could probably assume that's called Eilu Shulchan Malachim, because that was the whole reason for the Gzeira. Okay, so now let's talk about what happened to Aaron Becker in Lakewood. Once upon a time, Rabbi Becker was living in Lakewood, and he made his cholent and everything, and he forgot to plug in or turn on the crock pot. Now what do? No problem. Beinish Moshes. Get what's a nice good Goyish name? Get Jose Smith to come and turn on the cholent. So Jose comes there and turns it on, and then what about Bishul Akum? Okay, so nice shayla, right? Okay, so the obvious the heter would make you to think, well, maybe, hold on a second, cholent. Maybe cholent is not Eilu Shulchan Malachim. Okay, I just have to for the sake of Gishmak. Raise your hand if you think cholent is Eilu Shulchan Malachim.
In Eretz Yisrael, it goes on the bar mitzvahs and when.
Oh wow! All the Israelis raise their hands. What? I mean, go watch other Jews. So, you will all be happily surprised that when I asked Rabbi Bess this question, he said emphatically, "Of course, it's Eilu Shulchan Malachim. You wouldn't invite your friend over for Sholta on Shabbos? Come on." Very chashuv. However, Rabbi Weiss says the opposite. He says it's not Michael chashuv b'nei b'nei Adam. People don't think of it as chashuv. V'af echad lo yigas cholent. No one would ever serve cholent at a chasana or any suda which is mechubedes. And the reason why they don't serve it at a suda v'irah, it's only because it's a Michael Shabbos. It's not only because it's a Michael Shabbos. It's not chashuv. Now the truth is, what my colleague said here is true. That in Eretz Yisrael, chasanas do bring out cholent for the guests. At the end, I don't know about that for the aniyim. So anything which is served like as like a type of setting, like it's just like for the latecomers and everything like that. That's a good question. Buffet table, tzarachian. So Rebess is Machmer, Weiss is Makel, and you could yes, Rav Asher Weiss. So it's a machlekes, and the halacha is to be Makel because Savik Rabbanan is the cooler, right? That's what you're going to say. Anyway, okay. Basically, ask your Rav what he thinks, or use your own Seichel Yashar. Both make sense, I think. I hear Rabbi Best. It was almost split in the koilel. Some were like, it got very heated up and emotional. It's Sholta Eilu Shulchan or not. Okay, now it's interesting. What about electricity? The fact that the guy turned on electricity, maybe that Rebbe Ben Sina Bishul holds that then alternating current is not called Bishul because the electricity turns on and off, on and off, on and off, and therefore it's not called Bishul. What you did stops. Rabbi Weiss argues on that vehemently. He says that it's not a good heter. But if you in general go through Ben Sina Bishul, you hold of it. So Anachanabi, ask your local paisik.
What do you think about the meat inside of the truck?
It doesn't matter. It's part of the Michael. It's all one big. It's one big chold. Right? Not a mushel, mamish. It's a chold. Okay. Fine. Now the truth is, there's another very geshmaka heter which is coming up for the chold, and you just have to be patient. You have to stay to the end for that. That'll be the dessert. Parperet. It will be discussed. Mr. Hashem. I don't know if it'll be satisfactory, but I'll mention it. Parperes. The Shulchan Aruch says that anything which is Eilu Shulchan Malachim to eat with bread, like the Gemara says, is a problem. And parperes. What's parperes? We'll just keep it simple. Parperes means a dessert. And dessert is something that's served at the end of the meal. It's not served together with the bread. It's not part of the main meal. It's served at the end. Is that a problem of Bishul Akum or not? Is grandma's apple pie? Is that a problem of Shulchan Malachim or not? So the Shulchan Aruch, based on the Ram and the Torah, holds that parperes is a problem, even though the Gemara says daf lapis is a pas, something which is eaten together with bread. Now, you have many dishes that you don't eat together with bread in a sandwich or on the side. That everyone understands. Of course, it's usher. The Gemara just means that even the hummus and the things you eat together with bread, if it's eaten with bread at a table of a king, it's also a problem. Even if it's not eaten by itself, it's eaten together with bread. But what about something which is mamish, not part of the meal? Something which is the dessert, is that a problem or not? So the Pri Chodosh and the Chassam Sofer hold that anything which is not lalafis, is not part of the main meal, is mutter. They hold that dessert items are totally fine, which is a big Yeshua, at least for tziruf and certain food items we'll get to soon. However, the consensus of most poskim is that no, we go to Shulchan Aruch and the poskim and the Aruch HaShulchan says that the Gemara doesn't mean to exclude per se any desserts. Desserts are also part of the problem. And the Chalkas Ben Yamna explains that the idea is that even though, yes, it's not eaten together at his table per se, you wouldn't invite your friend over for dessert. Maybe that's what you give out at tell people to come over for a certain event and then you put dessert on the side. It's not on the table, but it's served as part of a meal. And therefore, it's also called Oil Shulchan Malachim because it's served together at that meal. That's his shot in Korkaban. There's certain different cuts of meat that you would not honor your friend with. The Yerushalmi mix, right? The gizzard and the korkaban, these things that people don't eat. The Gemara says, the Shulchan Aruch says, it's not a problem of roy l'skabed. It's not a chashuv thing that if it falls in your food, it's not batal. It'll be batal. It's not a chashuv. However, the halach is that the poskim say it's asur because of Bishul Akum. What do you mean? If you won't, if it's not an honorable piece of meat, so it's not on the king's table. The answer is it's parperis. It goes. You put it in together with other stuff at the meal. So then, just like the dessert, that's with parperis. Okay, so now let's get to donuts. Are donuts a problem with Bishul Akum or not? We just had Hanukkah. People had donuts arrive, and you have the shayla on different levels. You have the donuts that you get from La Palais Bakery, and you have the donuts that you get from mass-produced from Entenmann's and from Krispy Kreme. Are they a problem of Bishul Akum or not? So the first stage is to define what's called bishul, what's called bread, what's called pas. The halacha in the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch tells us that we have the sugi of pas akum, the bread of a goy, and you have bishul akum, the things that he cooks. Now the bread, we know widespread understanding is that there's a heter to buy bread from a baker. The Wonder Bread or any bread you buy from any bakery, you should be allowed because it's not done from Malabayit. It's not from a homeowner. It's done more on a commercial level. And that's for sure allowed. However, something that's cooked, we don't have the heter of palter. It's got to be Bishul Yisrael, even if it's made for business and for consumers. So, is a donut bread or is it bishul? Is it considered to be bread or not? Okay, how is a donut made? A donut is first you need a dough, and the dough is very similar to any dough that you would make a cake or a bread out of. It's a thick batter, and then it's deep fried in oil. Okay, so this is a machlokes rishonim between Rabbeinu Tam and the Rash. Do we say that on the one? It's the two-step process. The first step is very similar to that of bread, and the second step is that of cooking. Because when you make a bread, you knead the dough in a very thick way, and now you're deep frying it, and that's a way of cooking. We all understand that deep frying is like cooking. So is it bishul or is it bread? So according to Rabbeinu Tam, we say, look, when it comes to challah, we always go with the time that you made the dough, right? If you made the dough in a bread form, so that's a problem. And even though later you cooked it, it's called a bread. And according to Rabbeinu Tam, you have to wash and bench on your donuts. Okay? So that gives you an idea of whether or not Rabbeinu Tam is accepted in halacha, right? Do you ever see anyone bench on a donut? I've never seen anyone do that. The Rash holds no, even though you made a thick dough and it's very bread-like, is the air conditioning on? I feel everyone's falling asleep. You should have served the whiskey. It's more exciting. If the Rash holds no, that even though you made a dough that was bread-like, but now it's deep fried, so this thing is now a lokshen kugel. Okay, a donut is the same as a piece of a noodle, and it's mezonis. It'll never be hamaitzi, and it's also good for challah. You take challah off of your donuts. So the minhag in Klal Yisrael is not to take off a challah, not to make a maitzi on donuts. We hold like the Rash, not like Rabbeinu Tam. So to say that Rebelsky points us out to say that donuts are not a problem Bishul Akum because they're like a bread is kind of preposterous, because we know that all the Rishonim connect the two things. Something bread or is it bishul? It depends. We'll look at Hilchos Brachos and Hilchos Skala, and from there you'll know if it's bishul akum or it's pas akum. And in that regard, we can't rely on pas akum. Maybe it'll make a comeback, but kipshutai, the fact that it's bread-like is not a heter at all. Okay.
Wait, this is the
Donuts.
Donuts.
So
It's not bread.
donuts, even though it looks and smells like bread, but we don't treat it like bread at all. As far as maybe there's into machmer, your shemaim should maybe eat it in the middle of the meal to be yaitzer beinu tam your shemaim. But the Mishnah Berurah is very strong about saying that even if you eat 100 donuts and you get sick and everything, you don't have to bench.
Oh, okay.
Why? Because it's not bread. It's not pas kissin. It's bread.
Therefore,
Sorry, it's bishul. It's bishul.
It's like a noodle.
It's a noodle. It's a lokshen. Piece of lokshen.
So Krispy Kreme.
Oh, so now what's the heter for Krispy Kremes and Entenmann's, right? They're kosher, right? They have a symbol on them. Now just bring out this idea that in this year, that's part of the we're trying to bring out, is that even if something has a kosher symbol on it, doesn't mean it's kosher, right? What do you mean? It's so good. How can it not be kosher? And there's even a kosher symbol on it, but it's not so pashut. A lot of different things went into making that symbol there on your product. And it could be, if you understood a little bit better, maybe you would refrain from it and eat something else instead. Okay? Now, there's a whole back and forth between Rebelsky and Rav Schachter if donuts are oil shok malachim or not. Okay? Is a donut oil shok malachim? Let's see. So Rebelsky wants to say emphatically that for sure it's not oil shok malachim, it's not a chashuv thing, and therefore it's going to be allowed. Okay? That's the heter, it's not oila. That seems to be the basic heter. Schachter says, wait a second. At weddings, at the end of the wedding, there's this table called the Vina, right? The Viennese table, and there, if you see, you'll see that they put little small donuts on the Viennese table, and that l'chayr should serve as shulchan malachim. So why is it so pashut that it's allowed? So it's very geshmak back and forth. Shukach Rabbi Brander for this for Rabbi Genak, right? For this back and forth, it's very geshmak. So he wants to say back, Rebelsky to Rav Schachter, that no, that Avada, look, they had to change the size just to get on the table. Meaning, Avada, it's not Oshok Malachim. They just, some guy made some cup to put a donut on the table, he changed the size to make it look at it, but it's Batal Daitoi, is not called Oil Oshok Malachim. Rav Schachter said back that I did my birurim, and I found out there's two types of donuts. There's one donut which is made out of a yeast dough, and one kind that's made out of a cookie dough. Now the yeast dough is a totally different min than the cookie dough. And those are the ones that are on shokamalak, on the dessert tables. And you'll tell me that it's definitely the small ones, not the big ones. So he says, no, it's a very geshmak asvara. Be'etzem, they put the big ones on. But you didn't want to get dirty to chasana with the chocolate and the jelly all over you. So therefore, it's really all the same thing. Just they didn't put the big ones, for a side reason. So it should be usher.
Wait, so what's the
Hold on, let me finish, and then you'll hear. Then he says back, actually, he changed his mind after. He said, actually, I'm asking to fakert, the same svara fakert. That since they don't put it in the shulchan malachim because people don't want to get dirty, so the fact that some of them, the small ones, make it on the table doesn't count. And therefore, they're all mutter. Because right of the min is, this min is something which is not oil shulchan malachim, even if though it's for a side reason, because you don't want to get dirty with chocolate. So none of them are oil shulchan malachim. Okay, that is the heter for donuts. That according to these, the poskim of the OU and all the kashrus people that put the hechsher on Krispy Kreme, KSA, I think, it's not called oil shulchan malachim. Now, I asked Rabbi Bess what he thinks, and Rabbi Bess says, I think that the kashrus people hold that it's mutter because it's not oil, but I don't agree. I don't think it's not called oil shulchan malachim. I think donuts are oil shulchan malachim. Therefore, according to Rabbi Bess, seemingly Krispy Kreme should be an issue. So you should ask your posik what he thinks regarding that. Now there are other heterim though, besides oil shulchan malachim.
What about Rabbi Kraft?
Yes.
Aren't Indians baked?
I had to Mavire. I was not Mavire, but donuts are all deep fried for sure. Even if they put it through a little bit of heating at the end, it doesn't really count. It's just for confection. It's not really. Donuts are deep fried. I don't think entenmann's are baked. I'm pretty sure they're not. Even though they're crumbly and cookily because of the way that they made the batter, but they're for sure deep fried.
Maybe they're not bread. Maybe they're like cake.
Oh no! So I mean, again, according to the poskim, all donuts. You have this machlokes if donuts are oil shulchan malachim or not. Whether the cake, not cake. Okay, at the end of the day. Someone.
But what about the difference in the yeast? If only yeast donuts make it to the shulchan.
Yeah, so that he didn't. Even, I guess he didn't. He was masking. That needed more of a beer. But at the end of the day, he holds that they're all not oil shulchan malachim.
Whoever Ryan asked the White House chef about this, he said, no way to serve donuts in the White House. They do it.
Oh no. Okay, so what about the Hanukkah party? Did they serve donuts at the Hanukkah party in the White House?
They said really heavy duty flights.
Okay.
Is pasta the same or like ravioli?
Okay, we'll hold off on the questions for now. I just want to hop right. We still got more to go. Okay, so now there's another heter based on Rabbi Vadia that he says that if you buy from, we know that we're going to get to that also, that there's machlokes Shulchan Aruch and Ramah about what's called Bishul Yisrael. Okay, if a Jew is involved in the cooking process, is that good enough? According to the Ramah, you just turn on the fire, it's good enough. In bakeries, not necessarily do you have the standard of Bishul Yisrael for the Sephardim, but bakeries anyway are all bread, except for the donuts. When the Jewish bakeries make the donuts, so then you have a shiloh of Bishul Yisrael for the Sephardim now, because even the Yid turns on the fire, it's not good enough for the Sephardim. So he wants to be mater based on a svek sveka, he wants to say that you have the Ramah that you turn on the fire, and you have the fact that it's in a Jewish business, maybe a Beis Yehudi is allowed, and also there's a worker, maybe a worker is no problem. We'll get back into these svaras in Mirz Hashem soon, but that's his heter for a kosher bakery that has the mashgiach turn on the fire, even for the Sfardim. Now, that clearly is not a heter for Goyish companies. That's only if you have a yid turning on the fire, which you don't have in Entenmann's and in Krispy Kreme. Now, the truth is, if you want, you could throw in the mix 2 other svaras to mater. You have the idea that it's made commercially. Things that are made commercially, perhaps, is also a heter. Okay, the Paisim definitely use it as a tziruf sometimes. Okay, so that's first of all. And second of all, we have the svara before Parperes. When I go like the Ksam Sefer and the Pri Chodesh, that something which is served as dessert is not a problem b'chlal, because now malavis is a pas. So, what's that?
Is it made proportionally?
I said that something is made commercially. Commercially, perhaps is not a problem. Something that's made on a very grandiose scale is okay. We'll get to that. Mirz Hashem, a little bit more biyun. And in terms of the parperes, the fact that it's served as dessert, maybe it's also a heter. So these 3 things together, not shulchan malakim, it's parperes and it's commercial, then seemingly it shouldn't really be an issue b'chlal, and you should be allowed to have Krispy Kreme and enjoy that. Okay. Okay, good that. Donuts done. Okay, done with donuts. Okay, now what about tuna? A tuna that you buy in the store has a kosher symbol on it. Okay, does that mean that it was Bishul Akum or not? Did a Jew cook that tuna or not? We're going to see it's not so pashut. Maybe it wasn't cooked by a Jew, and you're relying on certain terim that the tuna, well, even though it's cooked by a goy, is not called a problem of Bishul in the first place. So how do you make tuna in a can? How is it produced? So it's cooked primarily by steaming. You steam it in 2 stages. First, it's steamed outside of the can, and then it's steamed again inside the can. This concept of cooking something twice happens in a lot of products. Sometimes, for example, corn cereal and rice cereal also will have a 2-step process. I saw last night in Rabbi Falk that he wants to say that it could be some cereals, maybe not so pashut what that term are, because after the first process, do you look at the ultimate process? Do you look at the process in between? Like, how does it work? So basically, the way that the Paiskim are understanding is we have to be machmer, meaning that if it's cooked twice, and it's oilo shulchan malakim after the first time or after the second time, then it's a problem. Because if you cook it once and that was good enough to make it chashuv to be eaten on a king's table, so it just became usher. And even if it was cooked already and cooked it again, we don't say the idea of ein bishul achar bishul when it comes to bishul akum. If the goy cooked something which was already cooked, and now when he cooked it again, it became oilo shulchan malakim, so that's enough. That should make it usher. That should make it usher. Unless the first time it's cooked by a Jew, and that would matter it. So the tuna is cooked twice. So is that going to help us? So the fact is that some say it's a problem because after it was cooked the first time, even though when it's in a can, it's not called oil shel malakim, right? Like we said before, you'll never serve at the White House a can of tuna, right? Only fresh stuff. But after the first time, it's already, right? It's cooked not in a can, so that should be a problem. Some say no, that at that point it's already on a lower grade quality. It's not oil shel malakim at that time yet. So therefore, on either stage, it's not called oil shel malakim, and therefore the tuna is allowed. That is one heter for tuna. That is OU without Bishul Yisrael. Now, another svard matter is that it's cooked through steam. Okay, is steam called cooking or not? So even though steam comes from fire, right? Fire cooked up the water, and so it's called tolas or. Everyone knows from Hilchos Shabbos that fire creating a cooking process is a problem on a deraisa level. Even if it's not the fire itself, it's something which came from fire. That should be a problem. However, we know that the Shulchan Aruch says that when you cook with steam, it's not a problem Bishul Akum. Okay, steam is not called Bishul. In other words, it's not maybe the derech to mivashal with it, so that's already good enough. So many places can say that steam has a heter, just like there's no difference between the steam of the water or the hevel, the hot air of the smoke. Just like smoke is allowed, so the hot hevel from the water is also going to be okay. Now, we'll skip a few points here just to chaparai, not to schlep it out. Okay, and the Minchas Yisrael wants to say that tuna will have a heter based on the first of all steam, and second of all also it's done commercially. So those two things together should be allowed. So what's halacha? Could be makel on OU tuna or not? So OU definitely feels that it's good enough, right? Because we have different svaras that say that it's steam and it's commercial and two-step process, these things. So that's what they hold. However, there are places like Rishon Miller held that it's possible to mahader to get dafka Bishul Yisrael. Now, different kashrus's, when it says Bishul Yisrael, not necessarily is it Bishul Yisrael for Sephardim. Okay, so for example, again, the OU hechsher is not Bishul Yisrael. You're assuming that it's not a problem Bishul Akum. Star K is good for the Ashkenazim. It's a Bishul Yisrael for Ashkenazim. And it could be that Rabbi Yossi will say, well, we'll have a lot of Svaras that it's made by a Jewish company, and that may also be good enough. Okay, you have to ask your Sephardi Paisik. Dagim, Geffen, Crown tunas are all Bishul Yisrael, even Ladat, Maran, and Geffen, Dagim, Crown.
So what do the restaurants here do?
It's a good question. We have to verify and do our research. I imagine that they rely on the heter of the OU.
Is there a list that you could know which ones are yes, which ones
You know what? We're gonna have to work on it.
Oh,
We have to work on it. It's a good idea. Can we put you in charge? As mashkia. As mashkia. Okay. Okay, let's go Ryan. We'll try to do this. We'll try to go a little bit. So right. If there's if there's a P on it, kosher for Passover, the special production, that's for sure fine. If there's kosher for Passover, so then it's for sure fine. Bishul Yisrael, l'kol hadeis. S also.
S
Okay.
is for asparagus? Yes. That means they did a third cookie? What did they do?
No, the Jew puts in the
Okay, so I want to hop right here. So what
We
about?
have a list over here in Toronto that they mention what's called Bishul, which restaurants are Bishul Yisrael tuna or not. Can we provide such a list for Los Angeles?
If you want, then we'll work on it. That's your request. Yes, we're working on it. We're trying to do that. Okay. Now, in terms of coffee and whiskey, right? That was on the list. So, is coffee and whiskey a problem with Bishul Akum or not? So, on the one hand, why not? I think there is a place, I forget who, that says that drinks maybe don't have a problem, but we don't go that way. Drinks need to be certified in terms of the sugya of Bishul Akum. Is it mutter or not allowed? So, for example, you're getting a coffee from Starbucks, or you're buying a whiskey from anywhere. I guarantee you, unless you're getting it from the Witkins, it's not Bishul Yisrael. Is it Bishul Yisrael? Depends. Okay. So even then, maybe not. What's the problem with whiskey? Right. Like I said before, there's many issues with all these items. Just want to talk about the Bishul Akum aspect. So Taisus says there's two reasons why beer isn't a problem with Bishul Akum. One reason is because we look at, one is that it's not oil shulchan malachim. Beer is not something you serve on king's tables. And the other reason is because we go with the bracha. Just like by bracha, even though there's grain in it, okay, certainly a very important component, but since the primary thing there is water for bracha, we make a shakel. You don't make a mezainis on your, or hamaitzi on your beer, even though it's made out of grain. Liquid beer, as one of my friends called it, a liquid bread, right? But you still make shakel because the water seems to be the ikar. So therefore, the Taisvus says like that. Now the Pri Chadash is very happy with this Taisvus, and he says, yes, you look at bracha for Bishul Akum, just like water is the main thing, you make shakel. So it makes an afkamina because coffee is certainly oila shulchan malachim. Okay, can't imagine a king's table or a wedding or something without serving coffee. Now the
Well, coffee is like a soup. It's a coffee bean soup. It's not like.
coffee bean soup
Yeah.
sounds exotic. Okay, so again, and also so that's one svar. Also, he holds that coffee is not oila together with bread. In other words, the Pri Chadash Lishitase holds that it has to be a non-parperis. If something's a parperis, it's allowed. So Pri Chadash says, besides the fact that coffee is the main thing is the water for bracha, you make a shakel, it's also not eaten together with bread. Even though some people dip their cookies into the coffee, right? Tea biscuits. However, that's not most people. Most people don't do that, so it's not called lapis pas. But either way, whether you go that far, like we said before, the place generally don't go with this parperis thing. The whole parperis is usher, even if you don't eat with bread. As long as on the king's table, it's a problem. But since the water is the main thing, and boring you, Abishai? Is it getting boring?
No.
Okay. No, it is. Sorry. So,
What was this thing you just said again?
I said again, the Pri Chadash holds like the Taisvus, and coffee is allowed for two reasons. Number one is it's eaten together, even if it's put on the king's table, but it's not together with the bread. And cookies don't count. Okay.
What about croissants? That's what I wanted to ask.
Croissants. Okay, leave it for later. So,
Okay.
okay. And bracha. The main svar is bracha. Since the bracha is shakel, we don't look at the coffee part. Look at the water part. Water is not a problem Bishul Akum, so therefore coffee is allowed. Seemingly. Okay. Now, now the Pesach Tshuva brings from his grandfather. The Panamir argues and says that the idea that Tais says that bracha is not really the main reason. Whatever, leaving out the lumdus, he holds that this svara Tais says is maybe like a doichak svara and doesn't always count. And if some sever agrees to him, perhaps sometimes, and therefore the main svara is it's not oil shulchan malachim. So now we're stuck because coffee we hold is oil shulchan malachim. So according to Panamir, we're stuck in a bind, and he doesn't hold this svara of bracha. So is there another svara to matter? Now the Chassam Sofer says an interesting idea. Says that it could be that why is bracha an issue? Why do we not count as a factor? When it comes to beer, the actual grains are dissolved into the liquid, and therefore we can't say, well, the bracha is on water. Yeah, but the thing is in there, and if a guy cooked it, so we cooked the thing which is not eaten raw, and it's on a king's table, so therefore it should be a problem. I don't care that you make the bracha on the water, but what about this other stuff? However, coffee doesn't have actual coffee beans inside it. It's only the flavor which is extracted from the coffee beans. And therefore, the idea of bracha shahakal on the liquid part is enough to prove that it's not Bishul Akum either, because there's no actual mamashos, no actual substance of coffee in the coffee. It's just a flavor that was extracted from the hot water.
What about Turkish coffee?
Oh, so Rosh Levi says that based on the Chassam Sofer, Turkish coffee made by a goy or instant coffee made by a goy should be a problem because you put the actual stuff inside of it, and therefore it should be worse. Now, the truth is the Paiskim, I think widespread, the Taz, the Shach, they say that the svara of Taisis bracha is a heter since you make a shahakal on your drinks. The main thing is the water, and therefore it's not a problem Bishul Akum, and that seems to be the classic understanding. If you want to be a machmer, go ahead and tavu alav bracha. But we go with the svara that the water is the main thing, make a shahakal on it, and therefore it's not a problem Bishul Akum either. Now, what about? Oh, so just interesting. The Shev Levi points out that this whole discussion of coffee is actually two steps. First, the beans are roasted, and then you make the coffee. So, what about that? Is that a problem? Like we said before, that if there's a two-step process, you have to look at every step. So the answer is obvious because a roasted coffee bean isn't eaten, right? No one eats roasted coffee beans, especially not on a king's table, and especially if it's instant coffee, you can't. Even though it's maybe prepared, but you can't eat it.
Coated with chocolate.
Sorry.
Chocolate coated.
Chocolate's also very.
Coated coffee beans.
Good question. I don't know. It should be a problem. So very cautious. That should, it should be also. Why not? You have a heter? I don't know.
Yeah, so it's roasted then.
It's roasted, then you turn it into coffee. So the roasting isn't an issue because you don't eat it like that. So a king would not eat a roasted coffee bean, right? Even if it's not eaten raw, but it's not oil shulchan malachim. Later, when he turns into coffee, we don't say ein bishul achar bishul. The bishul he did first, and then the second one added to the first one. So therefore, it should be a problem. But we'll say that will go after the water, and that will be the heter. Okay. So in terms of getting a coffee from Starbucks when you're at the airport, there's maybe issues of kalim, of tarfus in the kalim. That's a separate issue. In terms of Bishul Akum, could a gesundheit have a coffee from Starbucks? Of course, if it's coffee Yisrael. Okay. Now, what about whiskey? The question we've all been waiting for. So is whiskey really so different than these other things? So I tried to be muvar, but not to a great extent. Apparently, when you distill the grains and the beer mash, whatever it is, so the liquid, the water is evaporated. You separate the liquid from the mash, and then you have the water and the alcohol. You know, there is water still mixed in it, but seemingly the whole process was extracting the water, so seemingly the heter of being bottled to the water is not as great when it comes to whiskey, because adarabah, you extracted the water, and therefore perhaps it should be a problem. So the Beis Meir says, an interesting svara, that whiskey is a bria chadasha. You didn't cook something, right? Cooking means I took a food item which wasn't really edible or not as edible, and I made it more edible. Here, through my bishul, I created a brand new thing which didn't exist before. That's not under the category of Bishul Akum, therefore whiskey is mutter as far as Bishul Akum is concerned. If you assume this water thing is an issue, like he says, so you have this other svara that it's a brand new thing. I'm not cooking, I'm creating something new, and that's allowed. Okay. When we get to the Machlekes Rama Mechaber, about Mixas Bishul. What's called Bishul Yisrael? When can we rely that a Jew got involved in this cooking and now it's kosher to eat? This applies to going to any restaurant, right? Guarantee you that the chefs there are not Jewish, they're all goyim, and we're all eating Bishul Akum to some extent. So what is the heter? So the Shulchan Aruch says that as long as a Jew did part of the cooking in the beginning, the middle, or the end, is good enough. Okay? However, turning on the fire is sufficient for Pas Akum, but not for Bishul Akum. Okay? Turning on the fire is not good enough for Bishul Akum. However, the Rama argues, and the Rama says that even if you just light the fire or stoke the coals, you do something in the heating element, throwing even just one toothpick into the fire will be enough to make something Bishul Yisrael for the opinion of the Ramah and the Ashkenazim, therefore. Okay. Also, even the Machaber, it gets worse than that. What about in the middle or the end? If a Jew sees that the guy started cooking, now he wants to help out and make it not Bishul Akum anymore. So once it's already so first of all, the cooking process that he has to do has to be significant. He has to actually help in the cooking. But it'll cook anyway without the Jew touching it, so it could be that that's not good enough. That's first of all. Second of all, once it's already Michael Ben Soy, once it's already basically cooked, the Shulchan Aruch says that you're done. It's already fit to be eaten. Okay, even if it wouldn't be on a king's table, okay, something which is only half cooked or a third cooked, you wouldn't serve to a king, but since it's in the process of getting there, it's already a problem Bishul Akum, and therefore it's too late for a Jew to save the day. Now the Pri Chodesh says a Chiddush, he says it's talking about when you took it off. If it was on the fire the whole time, and then a Jew came and helped out, even the Shulchan Aruch agrees that it's allowed. But if he took it off after his Michael Ben Dusoy, half or third cooked, so putting it back on won't help according to Maran Shulchan Aruch. Now, in light of this idea, so the only safe way to make sure something's Bishul Yisrael in a restaurant setting is to make sure that the Jew puts the food onto the fire, because that is for sure imperative to the cooking process to get it there, and that'll be good. The only problem is you have to be careful, because a lot of times the pot could get removed from the fire. If something happens, and even according to the Ramah, if the fire gets turned off before it started cooking properly, so then it should also be a problem. So the moral of the story is that if you eat anywhere, you have to make sure that you trust the mashgiach. I was one time I happened to be in a restaurant, and I saw the Rav of the Hashgacha speaking to the owner, and he said, and he gave him a fire. And what happened? The fire is turning off. What do you do? He gave him, and the guy was kind of like a little nervous about what the answer was. So it was pretty obvious. So it's not so pashut that everyone behind the counter knows exactly what's going on. Make sure you speak to the mashgiach when you eat somewhere. Make sure there's no bugs in your food, right? Make sure that he knows he's competent. He's not just on, checking his whatever his. There's serious things going on in that kitchen, and just to say, it's a suffix, it's Bishul Akum, it's okay, is not the way of the Jewish nation. Make sure that the person cooking your food in the kitchen knows what he's doing. If the fire goes off, turn it back on. What's that? And make sure he's there. Okay. Now it's interesting that the Ashkenazim think that we got it so easy. The truth is, it's not so pashut. Many Ashkenazi poskim hold l'chachila not to rely on the heter of just turning on the fire to make it mamish Bishul Yisrael. The Jew putting the fire on. The Gra and others, they say that maybe the Ramah we could rely on b'di'evet and al-chachila. And Rishon Miller says that in fact we should try to be machmer to, if you can, to make sure that you're eating Bishul Yisrael legit, that the Jew actually did part of the cooking process, not just turned on the fire. And good luck trying to get that, because it's been so widespread. The truth is, even Rav Avadia is makel on the Sephardim eating in restaurants, because you have, once again, the illustrious Svek Sveka that he so avidly uses all the time. That first of all, it's you have this from the Ramah, that the Jew turned on the fire. Second of all, it's owned by a Jew, so a Jewish house, perhaps we can rely on those poskim that a Jewish house is allowed. And also it's a worker, it's not a friend, a worker is making the food. That maybe is also a heter. So Svek Sveka, he says you can rely on. However, Avada, L'chachila, even Ravadia says, especially for Bnei Yeshivas, to make sure that you have the good mashgichim and making Bishul Yisrael, even according to L'chachila for the Sephardim. Okay, so now I want to get to something which is very, very interesting. Interesting chiddush.
So if the food is cooked, fully cooked, and you're putting it inside the oven, that could be a problem for Sephardi.
Okay, wait a second. Here this will be the last thing. There's a little bit more, but this will be the last thing. There was a shaila that came up a little while ago when we actually learned just after we learned Bishul Akum, that someone's daughter had the helper help them make some salmon, and the guy did all the cooking. The daughter was not able to, whatever. It was a chesed situation. Basically, the guy cooked the salmon and the zucchini, and the father was distraught. What do I do? This is Bishul Akum. So what's the heter? So I'm going to tell you a chiddush that is fascinating, and it's something that was brought up then, and here it goes. So we mentioned before that once something is already basically cooked, so it's too late. You can't, it's already Bishul Akum. What are you going to do now, right? How are you going to fix it? You can't fix it. The answer is not so fast. According to the Shulchan Aruch, maybe you're right, because he holds that once it's Michael Ben Yosoi, once it's half or third cooked, So it's already cooked. We say it l'chumra, it's already cooked. However, the Ramah holds that no, you can still get some cooking in afterwards, as long as you're cooking it, as long as it's not finished, it's allowed. What if the thing is fully cooked, but cooking it more is not just heating it up, it's actually making it better. So what we call in halacha, mitstamek v'yachalai. Okay, it's getting a little bit more shriveled and better. It's dehydrating it is somehow making it more geshmak, making it softer or something like that. Is that going to be allowed? Now, it wouldn't sound so. For example, on Shabbos, mitstamek v'yachalai is not called bishul, right? If something is already fully cooked and you want to do chazara, want to put it back on the fire, if it's not cooked, it's asur deraisa. If it's fully cooked, just cooking makes it better, so you're allowed to do it, even though it's making it better. The answer is it's not kosher enough bishul for Shabbos. What about for Bishul Akum? So the ra'ah, the isur b'heter, and the smak, and maybe even some other places hold that mitstamek v'yachalai is good enough for Bishul Akum, that if Yisrael wants to add cooking, then that will be a heter. Now, this is an earth-shattering idea. The Shevet HaLevi brings it regarding potato flakes. Okay, if the goy cooks potatoes and dehydrates them, and now you want to make a potato something with the flakes. So is that called Bishul Akum? Because you cooked it already. So in that context, he says, first of all, there's a question if you undid the bishul by turning it into flakes. And second of all, the turning it into a new meichel is making it better. And we hold like these shitas, we could be mekel, the Shevet HaLevi holds, that as long as you're adding to the cooking, it's allowed. So basically, we took all of Bishul Akum and made it very, very easy to deal with, at least according to the Ashkenazim. Because if you have something which was made by a goy, if you put it in the oven and it made more geshmak, so now it's mutter. Now it's a little interesting because all the blia that's in the kli was from before was Bishul Akum, right? That's we were machmer that the flavor of the kalim is Bishul Akum. So now when I'm adding cooking to it, so why didn't I have a problem with the flavor in the kalim? So that's a good question. Don't have such a great answer for it. But basically, this is what we hold. We hold if you're stuck for sure b'shas chak, you could add cooking to something as long as it makes it better and it's allowed. I asked Rabbi Bess if we hold this heter or not, and he said that I told him our mokum in Shevet HaLevi, probably knew it already, and he said if it's not just warming it up, if it's actually making it better, then yes, there's a heter. But what we have to see still what Rabbi Falk says. I guess at the time he didn't know, and I looked it up, and he brings the heter of Shevet HaLevi. L'maisa, you can rely on this. You're allowed to put the thing in the oven to make it more geshmak, and it's allowed. So Barsha Kivanti, at the time that the person asked me this question,
Maybe buy you, they're not in the restaurant.
restaurant.
The restaurant is by the
That could be.
What is-
Restaurant, I can't make it.
No. Okay, but you have to know where to apply it. But if you have this type of question, it helped. So in terms of the situation that happened, this was a heter that the father was able to take the salmon and put it back in the oven. Now the truth is, salmon needs to be cooked to perfection. Cooking it more maybe doesn't actually perfect it. So that's a good question. That's an economy. It's going to be subjective to whether or not it actually made it better or just warmed it up or not. Maybe you like your salmon a little crispy, that maybe it will be good. But bottom line is, Shevet HaLevi, Rabbi Falk say this heter 100%, at least for the Ashkenazim. And Chalkas B'Yamin says B'Shas Chak you can use this heter. If the Jew adds some cooking that makes it better, it's allowed. So back to our very important cholent. This is the second heter, besides the fact that cholent is probably not under Shulchan Aruch. Yes or no? Question. But the fact is that when you take off the cholent and put it back, which is allowed because it's chazara, it's going to make it better because it's mitstamek v'yachalai. The fact that it stays on for another hour makes it more geshmak. That will be the heter for that cholent, the kol hadeis. Maybe not for the Shulchan Aruch, but for the Ashkenazim. Okay, so that is basically all I want to say. Now, the question with that situation with the salmon, there's actually two other svaras. The fact is, it was in a Jewish house, okay, and it was also done by a worker, someone that worked in the house. The bottom line is, if you have this svara, according to the Ashkenazi poskim, I think Ravad is more mekel based on Sfekas, but the Ashkenazim hold that if you have these two svaras, it's mutter b'diavad. If it's in a Jewish house and is done by someone that works in your house also, then those two things make it better, and at least b'diavad it's mutter. So in terms of the salmon being mutter because it's edible for sushi, that's a good question. Like we said before, I'm not really sure about that. And last but not least, the microwave, I'm not sure. Because I didn't see anyone that talked about it, but the truth is microwave is a machlokes if it's bishul on Shabbos or not. So that's definitely a good suffix you can throw into the mix. If it's in a Jewish house, it's done by your servant, and the fact is, it's a machlekes if it's called bishul in the first place, so it's probably allowed to ask your Rav before eating it. Yeshua Koyach, everyone.
Yeah.